You are listening to an American Free Press podcast.
Joining me on the line is James P. Tucker, Jr., the Bilderberg hound, and he is the world's foremost expert on Bilderberg and the global elite. And Tucker is American Free Press's editor emeritus and the author of Jim Tucker's Bilderberg Diary. Jim, thanks for joining us today.
It's always a pleasure.
Jim, on the American Free Press website, there is a story up there, an article that you wrote called Bilderberg Pushing Global ID Card, which has been garnering a lot of attention. It's one of the top stories for the entire month of February, which just ended, of course, yesterday. I want to talk about that in a moment, but before we do, and of course, most of the listeners are very much familiar with who you are and what you've done, how you've tracked down Bilderberg for all these decades. But something different is going on this year with Bilderberg. It seems like there's a possibility they might meet at the same locale that they did last year. Is that right, Jim?
Actually, they've met there for about the last 6 years, and there's strong indications that they will meet there again, according to their own dialogue, which was overheard and addressed to a source of mine who has international financier and knows a lot of Bilderberg people personally, and they feel free to talk to him. For 30 years now, he's helped identify where they will be. Now, this year, we think it's quite likely to be Dulles again, the Westfields Marriott, and it has been for the last several years for the very same reasons. As they tell each other, it seems that they'll always find out where we are. But Dulles is a convenient place because we all have reasons to go to Washington. We have to go to the State Department, we have to go to the White House, we have to meet with bureaucrats, all kinds of reasons to be going to Washington. So it makes it easy to duck over from Dulles Airport to the Westfields Marriott to have our meeting without having to announce our constituents. We're talking about European heads of state and international financiers and high officials of the U.S. government who are trying to keep the meeting out of the newspapers. But if they're going to find us anyway, may as well have the convenience of the Westfield Marriott. Now, understand that when they go to the golf play at Dulles, it's about a 10-minute cab ride from Dulles Airport, or in their case, limousine rides, to the Westfields Marriott, which itself is a very exclusive snob resort. It sits on 40 acres. It's got tall fences surrounding the entire 40 acres. They put up more reinforcements in anticipation of Bilderberg, and they have the local and state police guarding the outside, and they compensate the local taxpayers. They pay the overtime, of course, for the state and local police departments, and also pay something extra to the locality, so the people are glad to have them there. And always, as the limousines roll up with their little blue sticker on the right-hand side, identifying themselves as Bilderberg types, limousines and a few cabs, they'll get out the main entrance and be escorted by the cops inside. And by that time, a crowd has already gathered to jeer them and to hoot at them and also to tease them, like a year ago when they gave Rockefeller a 100th birthday cake, David Rockefeller. So it looks very much like Westfields Marriott again. We're not 100% on that, but the fact is you cannot make a reservation now. Could not make a reservation in November for one person, one day at the Westfields Marriott on the weekend of June 21 to 25. Now, it's quite unusual for a huge hotel like the Westfields Marriott not to be able to take in a single individual. Well, we start off with rooms for 20 people, then call back the rooms for just one person. So unusual for them not to be able to do it any time except that one weekend in June, which is June 21 to 25. So it looks like the Dulles, and if we can't pin it down 100%, we're going to send people there anyway to make sure that they're not there or that they are there. Hope to pin it down. The problem is that the man who for 30 years, the international financier I was talking about, normally gets the final confirmation from an aged Bilderberger, deep into his 90s, probably 100 years old by now, who's been hospitalized for 2 or 3 years. No, for longer than that. But the guy always tells us, oh yes, Bilderberg will meet. He's a Bilderberg founder. We don't have that absolute confirmation yet. I don't know if it's because the man died, or it's just too weak to speak, or if he's going to give us final confirmation. But again, it looks very much like, not 100%, but it looks very much like Dulles Airport again.
Of course, Bilderberg last year met at this Westfields Marriott, and I was in the area last year. I took a drive there and saw it. It's a pretty nice place. And prior to that, though, they didn't meet at the Westfields Marriott. They met somewhere else. But throughout the course of Bilderberg, they've met there, you said 6 times?
I think about several times anyway.
Right, okay. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty place. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's off the beaten path, I've found. Are you planning on heading there again?
Yes, I'd have Mark Anderson, who's been with me for the last several Bilderberg meetings, whether in Europe or here, plan for us both to be there.
Not really possible for you to go there without everybody knowing who you are, because at this point, everybody knows. In fact, you've brought...
Yes,
yeah.
As soon as I get there, they bring out a chair. People have brought chairs and settle me down next to the front gate.
Right. In fact, you've brought it to the point where now the mainstream media, the Washington Post and other mainstream papers, now report on Bilderberg, don't they?
Well, I'm not sure the Post will do it again if they don't have to. It's rather amusing because I think it was last year when Bilderberg met there, Mark Anderson got on the phone and called up all the local weekly newspapers, and there's plenty of them in a small daily in that neighborhood. Then they called the Washington Times, then called the Washington Post. Well, the Washington Times had a guy out there in a pretty big story. The Washington Post, well, of course, they had their chairman, Bill Graham, little what you call it, Graham now, the publisher or chairman of the Washington Post, has attended every meeting since his mama first took him there when he was wearing knickers. But the Post had never used the word Bilderberg, never had reported on it. But now when they saw it in the Washington Times, they felt it was necessary to mention the meeting. And so help me, they had Donald Graham pretending that he didn't know anything about it. Of course, not even at the Bilderberg meeting. They quoted him as saying, that's really something. They've got all those important people here. But he was one of the important people in there, compelled to do a fabricated little story because the Washington Times had sent a reporter out to the scene of the crime and written an authoritative story, raising the proper questions about why the secrecy, why do they try to keep the meeting secret and so forth. And they quoted little Graham as acting like he's surprised by the meeting, all those important people here.
And like you said, if there were several hundred sports figures meeting, the news would be all over the place. Several hundred Hollywood stars and starlets. There would be unending coverage. But here you have several hundred of the top financial people and political people on the planet. And it's a news blackout. It's still amazing. It's an amazing thing. And thanks to you, people are able to understand what Bilderberg is, because prior to you digging this stuff up, nobody really knew what it was. Even today, you mentioned Bilderberg and people think, what are you, a conspiracy theorist, right? Do people still come off with that attitude toward you?
Well, it was one of our readers quite some years ago, about 1970s, when Bilderberg was meeting in this country at some location. And they called and asked me, should we report this to our local media? Well, I should have thought about that a long time ago. So I said, yes. So they reported it, and European newspapers picked it up. And I got to the next Bilderberg meeting. We stopped first at the airport where the limousines are lined up to take the Bilderberg boys to the scene of the crime, which is typically 20 miles out of town, 20 to 40 miles out of town, a remote, obscure resort. And it's so much fun to see all these reporters and TV cameras and broadcast boys flashing lights at Henry Kissinger's face with his jaw dropping open, and all the other Bilderberg boys. So it was a lot of fun. Then we continued to do that, and learning the local newspapers once they met about 20 miles outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And we had learned the Atlanta newspapers and the local broadcasting stations, and they were all over the place. I remember Bill Clinton was the president at the time, because Hillary was first lady, and she attended that Bilderberg meeting. She was positively identified. So I got back to Washington and asked for them to comment for her press office. The First Lady has her separate press office from the President. And first they denied it. I said, well, we don't know anything about that. I said, okay, I'm positively sure she attended the meeting. She was observed and positively identified. So I'm prepared to write that First Lady Hillary attended the Bilderberg meeting. Her staff was unaware of her presence. They said, let me call you back. I said, you call me back in 5 minutes, or the story goes that way. They called me back in about 3 minutes and said, yes, she attended, and thought it was a very nice meeting of good people doing good things, or something to that stupid effect.
It's amazing, Jim. It's unbelievable.
Well, they don't convince everybody. Now, Lady Thatcher, while she was still Prime Minister, attended one Bilderberg meeting and had nothing to say, and no press conference when she got back. I chanced upon her at a reception in Washington, and we chatted for a few minutes. And I asked her about the Bilderberg meeting, and she said, this is a very close paraphrase, she did not like Bilderberg because Bilderberg wants to either surrender sovereignty to the European Union. She said, we're a member of the European Union. To us, it's an alliance, and we can have alliances, but we do not surrender one bit of national sovereignty. And that's why we'll not give up the pound in favor of the euro, because your currency is a symbol of sovereignty. And they still use the pound and not the euro, even though they're members of the European Union.
Right.
But she said, should not yield one bit of sovereignty to an international organization. She belonged to the European Union. It's like belonging to NATO. We cooperate with other countries without surrendering 1 ounce of national sovereignty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need somebody like, what's the nickname for her, the Iron Lady?
Yes, she's called the Iron Lady, and that was one of the reasons, but she was called the Iron Lady before that. Actually, she's kind of a tiny little creature, too. When you're on television, they make you look fatter and taller. But she's not as fat and not sure that she appears on television.
This global ID card, Jim, this is something that, like I said, it's picking up a lot of hits on the website. Bilderberg pushing global ID card. Globalists preparing to capitalize on recent retirement of Representative Ron Paul. What's this all about, Jim?
Well, they've proposed having a national ID card going back to the Clinton years. So all Americans have this card, Continental card, and ultimately a UN card, and they'd have your Social Security number on it. That was one of the first things the Republicans did when they had to control the House in 1996. One of the first things they did was rush out there and kill that requirement that your state driver's license have your Social Security number on it as part of your ID. Can you imagine what these monsters could do with your driver's license if they could get a hold of your Social Security number the way they could rob you blind? So the Republicans killed that one right away and took a good step further too. If any of your listeners have a bank account that has your Social Security number on it, close that account completely and open a new account, probably better at a separate bank, and tell them you do not want to give your Social Security number. Just give you a unique number for your own checking account, how many checking accounts you may have, whether it's commercial or personal or two different accounts or whatever. And you're likely to be told first by the lady behind the glass when you first start to open the account, then by the general manager of the bank, oh no, we have to have your Social Security number in order to open a bank account. Then you have to get their lawyer out there and you have to send him to remedial law school and say, no, you do not. You can open an account with a unique number for me that is not my Social Security number, and you cannot refuse to open me an account because I insist on it. And then their lawyer finally says, well, yes, he can. And that way you've protected yourself a lot better. Now, I'm not saying all these people that work at local banks are crooks. Consider how many hands your check with your Social Security number on it will go through in the process of being cashed and handled by so many people.
Right.
Any one of those people could write down your Social Security number and rob you blind. So you have to insist on that. That was Bill Clinton's plan to have it on your driver's license, would have been the first step toward the national ID card. So the national ID card that Bilderberg wants us all to trot around would have a unique number, not your Social Security number on it, thank God. But it would still be a card necessary to fly on airplanes, just stay at a lot of the big hotels. You can't use cash to reserve hotel rooms or flights anymore. You have to have some kind of credit card. I remember years ago when I was a sports writer in the 50s, we didn't like to use credit cards. We had one just in case of an emergency, but I'd carry a pile of cash in your pocket to buy your airplane ticket for cash, and you can make the reservations on the basis that you'll pay cash for your reservation. You can't do that now. They will not reserve your seat on an airplane unless you give them a credit card number for them to bill.
Yeah, and of course, you picked up this information, I guess, from the Washington Post. They had an editorial last month about the national ID card. It was called The Case for a National ID Card. And in the article, it says here that an effective solution against, I guess, tampering with these numbers and so on and so forth would be to issue tamper-proof biometric ID cards using fingerprints or a comparably unique identifier to all citizens and legal residents. Last week, both Obama and a bipartisan group of 8 senators seeking immigration reform urged something along those lines without calling it a universal national ID card. So Obama is clearly in the camp of these Bilderbergers, right?
Bilderberg owns him.
Who else owns them? Israel, Bilderberg. Are they all the same thing? Who doesn't own them? We don't own them. The people don't own them, right?
I don't want that kind of property.
Jim, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to explain all this to listeners. And thanks for covering Bilderberg, and thank you for covering them for all those decades and shining the light on these people and for violating the Logan Act, among other things. And we'll talk to you again next week, Jim.
Very good. Enjoyed it.